Larry, realistically, could be dealing with a pretty short timeline here, even though President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, earlier today says he does not want to use a weapon like this.
Yeah, he says Russia is categorically against it, but, he also has been saber-rattling some on his nuclear arsenal during the Ukraine war, so not everybody takes his assurances as encouraging. Our reporters, Alberto Nardelli, Jennifer Jacobs, Katrina Manson, broke the story that the U.S. has told allies that Russia could deploy a nuclear weapon or a mock warhead, which would at least cause as much confusion into space during this year. That's a timeline that hasn't been reported before. And the question is, and there's been much confusion about this, as everybody, including President Biden, has said, this isn't a nuclear weapon in space that would be shot at people on Earth. It could, though, if it's up there as soon as this year, if it's for real and Russia chose to use it, could knock out satellite communications of all sorts. It would be a catastrophe because there are so many satellites we all depend on, like even GPS.
That's for sure. And Larry makes such a great point. We could be talking about a phony warhead for all we know. There's so much noise and misinformation coming out of Moscow that it's hard to really be specific about what we're talking about here, Kaylee. But Larry, this will be a big deal when the G7 foreign ministers meet in Italy in April. This will be top of the agenda, won't it?
Oh, I think so. I think it's going to hover over all the debates, including debates over Russia's intentions in the Ukraine war. The questions about the EU and U.S. support for NATO. All of these things tie together. And of course, I would say some conservative Republicans in Congress have said perhaps that there's some scaremongering going on here to have yet another dimension of reasons not to trust and to act against Russia, but it's certainly going to be an issue at front of mind.
Well, Larry, you mentioned the question around the future of U.S. support for Ukraine, whether or not Congress is actually going to pass billions of dollars in additional aid. Joe and I were speaking with former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta just last week, who essentially told us if Congress doesn't do that, President Biden needs to be looking at every possible option to continue aiding Ukraine. What real options are there if it's not passed by Congress?
It's a real good question, and understandably, our sources and those of other folks at the Pentagon and in the White House aren't eager to spell out any last gasp or desperate measures they could take. There's been talk of U.S. allies in Europe paying to buy and then replace weapons from the U.S. arsenal, which would really put the U.S. into a bigger position. They could continue to send certain weapons from U.S. stockpiles, but with no guarantee to replacing them, it really raises questions about the U.S. readiness in Asia, for Taiwan, and elsewhere. And so they really are holding firm, and even if they develop some workarounds, the situation is urgent from the perspective of Ukraine, and there's no way to do billions of dollars in weapons without Congress acting.